People don't know why you're here. How many people have read Jeff's book, What Would Google Do? Tell us about that book and why it's important for everyone in here to read it.
It's not a book about Google, it's a book about all the changes in our world that this group understands well, but the rest of the world doesn't understand well, and so I hope it serves to translate a little bit. So
you, besides this book, which was a huge hit, it came out, what, a year? About a year ago. Yeah. You don't know this, but you've been a mentor to me in the sense of, from the very beginning, I looked up to you. There was a session in '05, I think, or '06, somewhere back east. You took me out.
Well, you took the New York Times out, and then I took you out.
I just said something like the New York Times is, what did I say? They're biased.
You said they were that they were in the pocket of a startup.
Something like that. Yeah. And you actually took me out on stage, and I felt like I'd been
But we hugged and kissed and made up later. There are no
but
pictures.
The point is that you've never given me any sort of wiggle room in terms of you don't just say yes to whatever. And so over time I've learned to ask you for advice on things about journalism, and should I blow a source who something like that, and you've always given me good advice. So you are. What is your current job? Director of Interactive Journalism? What is that?
No, I'm director of the Town Knight Center for Entrepreneurial Journalism at the City University of New York Graduate School of Journalism. And this morning, my students presented their pitches for their new businesses, trying to prove that journalism and entrepreneurship are not an oxymoron.
But you also are a consultant to a lot of mainstream journalism, and they look to you sometimes for advice on how to handle the new world.
Or as a target for spitballs, depending,
Yeah. So you come from both worlds, old school dead, dying media, and vibrant new awesome blogging type things.
TechCrunchy media.
Yeah. So what I want to talk to you about is the conflicts of interest issue, which I don't want to navel gaze too much at all really, but I think there's a bigger topic. So I've disclosed that I am making investments, and competitors have freaked out about that and tried to make a big deal out of it. And that's fine, I can defend myself. But there's this issue of transparency in journalism that bothers me as a consumer of journalism.
Right.
How big of a problem do actual journalists see that?
Well, let me ask you a question first. Are you a journalist?
No, absolutely not.
Why do you eschew the title?
I see journalists as priests. They're the only ones that are allowed to, tell us what the news is.
Okay, but you reject it rather than taking it over. Why not take it over? Why not say that you are a new kind of journalism?
Why do I need to do that?
So the title means nothing to you?
It doesn't mean a whole lot to me, no. And
what does it mean to you?
Pardon me?
What does it mean to you? What does it convey?
When I think of journalism, I truly think of people who are very, very biased, hiding their bias behind theoretically objective text. But I see that the adjectives they use, what they choose to cover and not cover, shows who they really are. And I remember at a dinner once in New York, I met a guy who'd been at CNN forever, before that the Washington Post, and he was telling me how he covered politics for a long time. And I said, so are you a Republican or a Democrat? And he said, oh, I actually can't tell you. And I said, why? And he goes, well, that would be, if that got out, what I was, and it would affect how people view my content. And I said, I actually feel like I have a right to know what your actual views are so that I can read your supposedly objective content in light of that.
We absolutely agree about that. I said it one way, and then David Weinberger said it better, that transparency is the new objectivity. That objectivity was bullshit. There's no such thing.
Sure.
It's impossible to do. And transparency is the least you owe your audience and your readers, and the least they should expect from you. Right? So there's two issues for you and the actions recently. One, transparency. I think you did the right thing. The second question is whether or not people think you should or should not invest in companies, and whether that affects your reputation with them. How many of you think that it's perfectly fine for Michael, as the head of TechCrunch, to invest in companies? How many people think it's not fine? If the fines win, how many don't give a shit? Somebody's not raising their hands.
But that's an issue that I'm not interested in discussing.
Okay.
Mostly because I don't really care. I assume that, like what Tim just said, if I screw up on that, we'll lose our audience.
I agree.
Yeah. What I'm more interested in is...
Well, and actually, you go back to the earliest days of TechCrunch. People forget that it was not a content product. It was you investing and using it, using what you knew as a way to get out. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But should the New York Times, should a reporter for the New York Times reporting on, say, Obama, put their political affiliation, how they voted, in the byline or down at the bottom?
I believe so. Now, I've gotten an argument.
Do they agree?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. And I've had this discussion with various editors there, and their best argument, I think, is that if it's reductive to a simple word, it's not very helpful. In other words, if you're covering religion and you used to be Catholic, then should you say that? I think it's relevant. But can you presume what that person's attitude toward abortion is based on that fact? No, you can't. So if you say, I voted for Clinton, or I voted for Obama, or I voted for McCain, I voted for Clinton first, Obama next. What does that tell you? Well, it's part of the story, but I think we absolutely should do it if we're expecting the rest of the world to be transparent.
Did you vote for Gore?
Yeah.
Even Gore? So you vote Democrat no matter what?
I voted, my first year voting, I voted for Jerry Ford.
Jeez, okay.
Jimmy Carter was that bad.
You're that old.
Oh, fuck you. You're looking older, Arrington.
I didn't start voting in the 70s, I'll tell you that. So they're not going to ever do that?
No, they're not going to do that, but I think that they should. If you go to my blog at buzzmachine.com, the About Me page is obnoxious in its telling you too much information about me, but it does that for a point, that we should tell people anything that is possibly relevant about what we do.
Well, but see, I can't be that transparent. I mean, if I'm transparent as to who my sources are on a story, I'd lose my sources. If I have buddies out there that I help, they help me with stories, I never disclose that. Clear conflict of interest, right? Because then maybe, they end up speaking at our conference, or, I cover something that maybe I almost wouldn't have covered otherwise, because you make judgments on what's worth covering and what's not. I can't disclose that.
Well,
If I just made a list of all my friends, it would be a disaster, right?
You have some.
Yeah, I set myself up for that.
Oh, you did, yes. That was too obvious. But
yeah.
Well, I don't know. I'd push you harder on that, and you push transparency as the salve for this issue of investment. I think you should try to push it as far as you possibly can, as long as it doesn't affect your reporting.
Well, see, my opinion, I'm transparent about financial conflicts of interest because
Right.
I have to be, and it makes sense.
Right.
I'm not transparent about who my sources are, even though I argue that makes me biased. What I think, because we're never going to get people to disclose, this is one of my sources, or I like this guy because he spoke at my conference.
No, I agree with that.
I think the best we can do is try to educate an audience into thinking everyone's biased. There is no such thing as an unbiased piece of reporting.
Absolutely. And the idea is, are you an advocate? Everyone's an advocate. The reason that journalists pick the stories they pick is because it's going to have some impact on the world, right? So I guess the rule for you was that you should be transparent about everything possible that doesn't directly affect your reporting, and that a reader shouldn't have a proper right to know to judge your work.
Okay, but none of our competitors will do that,
Fuck
right?
them.
That's what I say almost every day.
So that's the interesting thing to me,
but
is I don't really care about the definition of journalism. I don't really care about that. But to me, I find it very interesting that you don't aspire to taking over that world. You just ignore it because you think it's devalued.
I'm trying to pull up some of your tweets here. Yeah, I think that I do see it as a priesthood, and so the priests are the only ones that can talk to God, and you're not allowed to read the Bible, and et cetera, and that's just ridiculous. I mean, there's anybody who wants to become a blogger can become a blogger,
absolutely,
and report news, and they build their own reputation. What's wrong with that?
Right.
Yeah.
I wrote a post this weekend about the idea that I think that the architecture of journalism is starting to mimic that of the internet, end to end. So the witnesses are telling the world what they see. And Andy Carvin, if you don't follow Andy at NPR, A-C-A-R-V-I-N, he's looking at it from above and plucking out all the good stuff from Egypt and Syria and Tunisia and so on. That's the new role of the journalist. Is the conversation goes on without us. We in journalism thought the conversation needed us. And that's not the case anymore. It's end to end, like the internet. We can add value to that in all kinds of ways. We can vet and find good people and find nodes and networks and give perspective and all that.
In journalism school, is that what they're teaching, or are they still teaching the old stuff?
Oh, there's a lot of the old stuff. Well,
facts and
the way we put it at
whatever.
CUNY is that we still teach the eternal verities.
What does that even mean?
It means completeness, fairness, the obvious things.
Yeah.
But I've learned all kinds of new ethics from the blog world. I've learned the ethic of the correction, which you don't see corrections on the evening news. They make mistakes. I've learned the value of the conversation. I've learned a lot of things in this world. Ariana, I think that her insight, I asked myself why no major media company aside from The Guardian started a Huffington Post and no one bought it. And I answered my own question, concluding that because they don't think it's content. Because content is that which content people make, and she's not a content person. This is the hoi polloi talking.
Yeah.
And so there's a disrespect to the public.
Basically an aggregator.
Right. There's a disrespect to the public, which in turn brings a disrespect.
I also
to
kind of go about that. I mean, aggregators have their value, but we tend not to aggregate. We tend to, story's been overcovered. We tend to leave it alone and move on to. So I'm kind of with the other people on that.
Yeah.
Ariana and I have been talking about doing something, and she actually announced it on stage. I didn't know she was going to, but we're going to put together a site to have a discussion around this, and we really want you and Jay Rosen to be a part of this.
We'd be delighted to.
And so we're going to be, it's already been announced, we're going to be doing something over the next couple of weeks, and if you have
Ariana does that, doesn't she?
Yeah, she tends to.
She just announces things.
She just announces things, yeah. So, and so I think this is a beginning of a very long, ongoing discussion that I'm fascinated with, which really comes down to, do I have the right to do what I do for a living? And I think I do.
Well, you certainly have a right to do it, and the question I think is, I would love to see you change your mindset a little bit and imagine that if you called yourself a journalist, how would you define that? Because I think listen, you are a model for my entrepreneurial journalism students. The idea that the industry of journalism is going to be saved by the big old institutions is far friggin' over, right? Innovation is going to come from entrepreneurs. Journalists have to make their own jobs. They've got to disrupt the industry. So you're a role model, scare some people, but you need to be a role model because you're an entrepreneur and a journalist, I would say.
That sounds like, how are we going to protect the buggy whip manufacturers?
No, I don't want to protect them. I want to disrupt them. And you're the model for doing that. That's what I'm saying.
We're doing our best. We have one question, then we're going to have to end.
I say this as a colleague of Mike's and a friend of Jeff's, but
just say who you are.
I'm Phil Hensel from the Huffington Post Media Group.
And previously with the New York Times.
With the New York Times, and I couldn't agree more with all of where you want things to go. Transparency and clarity and the end of the priesthood and the multi-part communication. But I think you were throwing a baby out with the bathwater in your dismissal of everything in the past. And the key thing is,
who are you talking to?
I'm talking to both of you.
I don't think I'm dismissing everything in the past.
Listening. There is a skill that transcends technology in being able to go and talk to someone and make it clear that whatever you thought before that conversation, you're putting that on hold so that you understand what they're saying and you can describe it to someone else, and to say that you are where you come from is true, but the professional skill of listening is good for people in business, is good for people investing, right? You're a better investor even if you think that it's a stupid category to be in, you turn that part of your brain off and you listen.
Amen, Saul,
and
of course.
The whole professional ethic of journalism is all about making all.
Are you going to let him say that about you?
No, I won't.
So
the problem here is, A, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so maybe you didn't listen well enough to me.
Nice.
B, I think that journalists have done a very bad job of listening. Right? Look at your former boss, Bill Keller's obnoxious link-baiting column in the Sunday New York Times Magazine this weekend on Twitter. Right? It's just trying very hard to say fuck you to the entire world and say, I don't want to hear you. Your conversation to us is noise. That's what Keller said. Not good listening. The technology provides new tools and new ways to listen, and journalists are starting to learn that. You were key to that. You changed the voice of the New York Times itself by blogging there. You were more open to the whole world. You changed it a great deal, but it still has a long way to go.
And
Saul did.
I like how you tore him down and then you built him back up.
Yeah, it's like classroom.
All right. So this is to be. You're good.
It'll be continued over lunch.
He doesn't look like he's good.
No, he's not.
He did yeah.
He goes like that. It's all right.
He's going to make my life hell now.
Yeah.
Listen, this is the beginning of a conversation.
Yeah,
thank you so much for coming. I know you're jumping on a flight now, and really appreciate it.
Good.
All right, thanks, Jeff.
Cheers.
Okay.
That was good, guys. Okay, well, this is my favorite part, the battlefield, and we're going to change things around. We're going to bring a panel of